A major trade shift has hit steel and aluminum industries around the world with the Trump administration's new tariffs enacted earlier this week. To help us break this all down, joining me in the studio for this week's Weekly Focus is our trade correspondent, Moon Hae-ryun. Welcome, Hae-ryun.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Hae-ryun, starting off, could you please tell us what these new tariffs exactly are and which countries will be subjected to these levies?
So the new tariffs that rolled out on Wednesday are due to hit all steel and aluminium exports to the US, with the rates levied at 25%. Up until now, the Trump administration's tariffs were targeted at specific countries, Canada, Mexico, and China. But these sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminium apply to countries around the world, including South Korea. Previously, such exports from South Korea to the US were duty-free but capped at 2.63 million tons under a quota system.
Right, and I also want to ask you what kind of impact this tariff will have on the steel and aluminum industries here in South Korea.
Right, so now that all shipments from South Korea will face the tariffs without a quota, this poses both risks and opportunities. And as tariffs now apply to top exporters that had formerly enjoyed tariff and quota-free exports to the US, South Korea, the fourth largest supplier to the US, may find new openings in the US market. Still, the risks are significant with intense competition such as cheaper steel products from Southeast Asia, as well as the inclusion of steel and aluminium-derived products such as bolts, nuts, and springs under the new tariff scheme. These products are primarily manufactured by small and medium-sized businesses, which have fewer resources to absorb the impact, making them especially vulnerable to financial losses. Shinjin Fasteners is one such company that produces nuts and bolts, with 35% of its sales dependent on exports to the US and Europe.
Developing new products to stay competitive isn't easy, especially when it comes to sourcing materials. It's not like there's a set supply from the start. You have to create value and generate demand through product development.
Another company, GJ Aluminium, faces the challenges of diversifying its exports.
We're trying to focus more on Europe and Southeast Asia. But the challenge is that our facilities have primarily been set up for the U.S. market, and each of these new regions has very different requirements and characteristics.
And also tell us how the South Korean government has been responding to these concerns.
So the government, for its part, has been ramping up efforts to counter these impacts. Acting President Choi Sang-mok outlined measures on Thursday to support such SMEs, ordering ministries to prevent market imbalances from surplus steel, as well as designating a task force with the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency to assist companies in navigating the new trade landscape. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Startups and SMEs and the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy have each convened meetings with industry insiders this week in order to gauge market reactions and needs.
It looks to be around 1,800 domestic farms that are currently exporting to the U.S. We want to move quickly with a survey to get a clearer picture of the expected impact and what kind of targeted support these businesses will need.
The Trade Ministry pledged to support exporting firms with a total of 61.1 billion Korean won, roughly $42 million in export vouchers. This initiative allows SMEs to access services essential for overseas market expansion, including legal consulting and trade certifications. With the recent rise in global trade uncertainties, the government has increased the export voucher budget by 9% compared to last year.
Definitely a lot of uncertainties currently at the global trade front. So, Hae-ryun, last but not least, I want to ask you, how is Seoul planning to move forward in the days ahead?
Right, so moving forward, the government is planning to announce a more detailed and comprehensive support strategy sometime this month. During a meeting with industry leaders on Thursday, the industry minister highlighted plans to strengthen trade defense mechanisms.
The government is toughening up its trade defenses to crack down on unfair trade practices and boosting the resources of our Trade Commission to dig into these issues. We also plan to strengthen monitoring of unfair imports.
There's also aggressive negotiations with the U.S., with the country's Minister for Trade landing in Washington on Friday for high-level talks.
If we think of this like a test, they must have some kind of grading rubric, right? We need to figure out what that rubric is. Then we need to quickly fix anything we're getting wrong, and we need to convince them of the things that we can argue against.
With trade negotiations ongoing, officials stress that both short-term financial aid and long-term structural adjustments will be crucial for the survival and competitiveness of Korean firms in the global market.
All right, our trade correspondent Moon Hae-ryun, thank you for the wrap-up.
It was my pleasure.